Chapter 671 to 235 Sun City. Relying on them turned out to be in vain. In the end, everything still depends on me. I hope to grasp as much information about the alien realm as possible before that. We know next to nothing about him, though now that I think of it, the world seems to have changed as well after Shu's death. An idea flashed through his mind as he stood above the primordial waters. La felt as if time around him had once again slowed down. Experience exclusive tales on novel bin.com. No, it was not as if. Overlooking the mortal realm, La realized that this was not an illusion but that time had indeed slowed down. The entire world's pace had decreased slightly, manifesting as time stretching out, and the place where he was the most noticeable. This slowdown seemed to originate from high to low, beginning from the outer layers of the world and the sea of origin and gradually intensified, spreading throughout the entire world. It was like a dying being trying to delay the arrival of death. Longing for a turnaround that it didn't know existed. Is it because of Shu's premature death? Yes, the death of one of the 9 pillar gods, part of the origin being plundered, although this isn't enough to cripple a world, yet it's an extremely dangerous omen. So the world began to save itself. It further slowed down the passage of time, then, at all costs, stirred the origin. But it lacked consciousness. This act was nothing but a slow death. He didn't think this method held any meaning. Of course, it might have, but La was not yet able to observe changes on that level. In any case, no matter what, La couldn't change the changes induced by the world's instincts, nor did he intend to do anything. It wasn't yet time for him to take action. Shu's death was already in the past, unexpected as the outcome was, but La could only choose to accept it. No matter how much he loathed Isis for causing this unfavorable situation, how much he detested the alien realm, the game of chess had to continue. HMPH, traitor, do you think the gods of the alien realm will trust you? With a cold snort, La noticed that the climate in the mortal realm had unknowingly changed again. And it seems it might also be because of Shu's death. This time the range of change was much greater than he had anticipated. The barrier between the sea of origin and the material world seemed weakened, allowing for stronger forces to seep through. Of course, this was mutual, not just them, the opponents were the same. Let's begin. This is the second time now. I hope this time you managed to achieve some results. Under La's gaze, the changes in the mortal realm appeared like a fast-forwarded silent film. Tefnut's torrential rains descended first, sandstorms spiraled over the great desert. Various beasts displayed fierce eyes, as though they were insects in the desert or birds in the sky. As for Thoth, looks like he does have some skills. With a glance, La saw that the other party seemed to be attempting an act similar to divine descending. Only, in this case, it seemed that many practices of demon art were mixed in. Previously, Shu didn't do this because he couldn't do it. Even La could only send down an oracle and then was confined above the sea of origin, outside of the world. But due to Shu's death, the law seemed to have a slight loophole. This loophole temporarily couldn't be bypassed by divine power, but for Thoth, who took over some of the magic mysteries after Osiris's death, this seemed indeed exploitable. Mortal realm, the royal palace of Memphis. The upheavals in the sky were not yet reflected on the ground. Even the individuals involved did not know that the moment they stepped back into the royal palace was precisely Shu's time of death. Messa merely keenly noticed, the moment he appeared again in front of the pharaoh, that the sounds of the wind seemed even more intense above the palace. The wild air currents emitted bursts of sounds, beating against buildings and withered plants, bursting out with piercing booms. The strong winds swept through the streets, circulating back in narrow spaces, like night owls screeching, harsh and piercing. The aberrant weather seemed like someone was wailing, cursing, releasing his malice upon all things. Overwhelmed, Messa heaved a sigh, knowing this ruckus had been noticed not only by him but the pharaoh as well. Guards, expel him, this is not a place for him to tread. Inside the grand and splendid palace, Ramses II's expression was stern. Seeing Messa again, the urge to kill churned in his heart. Yet with the experience of the last encounter, the pharaoh was very aware that he likely could not kill him. This was a sin person favored by the evil god, capable of wielding demon art, conjuring water marshes, and even forging curses. Recently, more loyal slaves among the Hebrews stealthily ran from their congregations and informed the pharaoh about the changes there, even offering a pot of clean water. Because of this loyal slave, Ramses II knew why his schemes hadn't worked. It wasn't that his plans were flawed, but that the other party had supernatural powers aiding him. However, hearing is not like seeing. To verify the slave's words, the pharaoh commanded the criminal to drink the pot of clean water to see if it truly possessed the ability to discern faith and bestow a curse. The outcome naturally did not surprise. Those still faithful to the Egyptian gods aged and died instantly upon drinking the clean water, whereas certain faithless criminals were unharmed. Your Majesty, your steadfastness will not yield what you desire. I do not wish to be your enemy, we just want to leave. Chapter 672 to 235 Sun City _2. With a single wave of the staff, the surrounding guards retreated. Amidst the sounds of the wind outside the palace, Mesa's voice remained loud. Egypt has already lost a year's harvest, and the vegetation in the fields is all withered and yellow. What kind of price do you need to see to let us leave? Never, you are the wealth of the Egyptians. The sinners banished by all gods. No one can leave until your sins are cleansed. Clang. Rising from the golden throne, Ramses reached for his bronze sword, noticing that the opponent's demon art had grown stronger. But it didn't matter. He was not afraid of Mesa's methods, the snake he conjured, the winds he summoned, simply because these powers had no effect on him. He was the pharaoh, a god in the eyes of the Egyptians, not just a trick or a way to maintain a sense of mystery and prestige, but an objective description. Because every pharaoh and his descendants were protected by divine power, no mortal magician could harm them with demon art. Derived from the sun, the divine power always surrounded Ramses. Though he couldn't use it, he could still be protected by it. Swoosh! With a swing of the sword, the eyes behind the gold mask were filled with murderous intent. The air was cleaved by the sword's edge, catching Mesa somewhat off guard. Ding! Raising his hand to parry, the serpent staff blocked the edge of the bronze sword. But under the pharaoh's attack, Mesa still stepped back. Ha! Sin people! Where is your demon art, your god? If you've tried time and again to have me let you leave, wouldn't the best way be to take me down, to capture the master of Upper and Lower Egypt? Why aren't you doing it? Bang! Another powerful blow, and although decades of shepherding had left Mesa's physique sturdy, he indeed had no training in martial arts. When their supernatural powers had no effect on each other, he could barely defend himself. In front of him, the pharaoh showed no mercy. Come on, fight back. If you defeat me, I'll admit that your god is superior to mine, and you can take me hostage to make the soldiers retreat, lead your people away. But why aren't you acting? Is it because you can't? Swoosh! The long sword swept across. Mesa awkwardly dodged this blow. His staff lightly waved, and an invisible force immediately pulled him back. Moving forward, the pharaoh attacked with another swing of his sword. However, finally catching on, Mesa didn't meet the attack. His figure flickered, and he appeared at the doorway of the royal palace. Hey! With a cold sneer, seeing the enemy retreating, Ramses II did not pursue further. He was also of considerable age. Standing in the center of the royal palace, the pharaoh leaned on his sword. Find adventures on novel.com. At that moment, he felt the changing looks from the surrounding guards and ministers. The morale and confidence that had fallen before were restored within those few blows. And the fear of the evil god was swept away. Yes, the pharaoh was still here. Even if the opponent had the protection of the evil god, the Egyptians still had their deity in the mortal realm. Sigh, Your Majesty, your swordsmanship has truly opened my eyes. But the will of God cannot be stopped by the power of mortals. Standing at the doorway of the royal palace, Mesa had never imagined that Ramses, as the pharaoh of Egypt, would dare to draw his sword in conflict. And he also had to admit, although somewhat risky, this was indeed the best response. He also saw the changing glances around. The hearts that had loosened due to losing contact with the deity seemed to tighten once again. His own desire to lead the people away seemed even more unlikely now. Mesa, your so-called will of God is merely the power of the evil god. The glory of La illuminates the world, just as the sun rises from the east every day, never ceasing. Moreover, as the embodiment of God in the mortal realm, I am here. If you have the ability, then come and kill me. But as long as I don't fall one day, the Egyptians will not submit to you. Rustle. Suddenly, as if responding to Pharaoh's declaration, accompanied by a flash of lightning. The previously dry land welcomed a torrential downpour. The heavy rain fell from the sky, instantly washing away the previous dust. Seeing this scene, the surrounding guards seemed to recall the accomplishments of Ramses II. Just as he had said, he had never backed down. "Your Majesty, it seems I cannot persuade you. But I believe, one day, you will change your mind." Messa looked around. At that moment, in the royal palace, those ministers whose gazes had previously flickered were now resolute. He stepped back, his body disappearing into the curtain of rain. Such heavy rain was manageable for the city, which had long had measures in place to deal with rainfall, but for the several 100,000 Hebrews living in makeshift housing outside the city, it was a major disaster. With another wave of his staff, the increasingly mystical serpent staff immediately took him away, and the silence returned to the palace in Memphis. Clang! Within the palace, taking a few steps back, sheathing his sword, Ramses II sat back down on his golden throne. His gaze swept over the ministers present, none dared to meet his eye. Good, because the turmoil brought by the previous prophecy from the high priest was easily quelled. Nothing could unify the people more than a victory. However, this particular rainfall seemed quite coincidental. Was this another act of divine punishment? Regardless, the annihilation of these sinners was indeed urgent. Gentlemen, as you've seen, these people cursed by the gods are becoming increasingly rebellious, so if I decide to wage war and annihilate all Hebrews, how long will the preparations take? With a calm demeanor, Pharaoh inquired indifferently, as if he wasn't discussing a massacre. Your Majesty, if you mean crushing, that isn't hard to achieve. But if you want to kill them all, the number of their civilians far surpasses our soldiers. Unless it's within a city where we can guard the gates and walls, it's nearly impossible to kill them all. A minister responded, articulating the reason Pharaoh had previously refrained from using force directly. So all we need is one city, then, Ramses II said, his fingers caressing the hilt of his bronze sword, his eyes growing colder. At one point, seeming to think of something, he said, I remember previously, those sinners were responsible for constructing the temple? Yes, Your Majesty. It's just that the construction was temporarily halted due to the previous natural disaster. Very well. Nodding, Pharaoh seemed to have discovered something. He slightly raised his hand, signaling the minister to take note. That capable evil god believer adept in demon art, tell him I've changed my mind. The Hebrews are sinners proclaimed by Allah, thus they cannot leave. But if they clear their sins, that could be reconsidered. One temple is not enough. If they can construct a city like Heliopolis, worshipping La in the Sun City, perhaps their sins could be forgiven, and the gods might even permit them to leave. The prior prophecy received by the high priest also reminded Pharaoh that the holy city seemed a bit far from Memphis. Give the sinners hope, build a city, and then dedicate the city and their lives to La, all the while erasing potential threats. Go, Pharaoh said plainly, if they do not comply, then it will be war. Their blood will stain the Nile red, and their bones will enrich the vegetation for the coming year. This is my final act of mercy. Chapter 673-236 Sacrifice and Poetry. After the great wind there came a great rain, with no sign of the natural disasters ceasing. The mortals of Hemenu had never experienced anything like this. It seemed as if heaven and earth were venting their wrath, punishing the creatures as insignificant as ants. Upon the heavy clouds, the stars faintly twinkled as though echoing the rain in the mortal realm. Their trajectories began to deviate slightly. In the deserts far from the Nile River, venomous insects and pests gathered in swarms like they were awaiting something, yet they did not move from their place. Meanwhile, the pharaoh's edict also traveled from the city of Memphis and swiftly reached the dwelling place of the Hebrews outside the city. The rain continued, making the roads muddy and difficult to traverse. However, accompanied by the envoy came 100,000 elite guards. Despite the pouring rain, they still obeyed the command of the god of the mortal realm, willing to give their lives for him. Absurd, this is practically murder. Smack, there was a loud bang on the table, the speaker's anger clearly visible. To construct a city in such a downpour is sheer impossibility. The rain will wash away the foundations and prevent the materials from drying. Such construction is nothing but a fool's dream. Inside the hastily constructed council hall, a tall middle-aged man spoke loudly while around him, many nodded in agreement. Yes, indeed it is. Previously, they had us construct the temple amidst the sandstorm, and we were already exhausted. Although the sandstorm only increased the difficulty of construction and caused a lack of water, but rain. I have never heard of any construction completed in the pouring rain, let alone a whole city. In this weather, even walking is risky for fear of falling into holes. How could we possibly go and build a city? Quote. Thud, thud, thud. Silence, please. I know you are angry, but gentlemen, we have no choice. Frowning slightly amidst the murmurs of the crowd, Aaron knocked on the table. Pharaoh's army is out there, we cannot hold them off. Of course, they cannot kill us all, but most of us would die here. You are all people among the Hebrews well known for your status and capabilities, you should understand the severity of our situation. Does any one of you wish to bet on your luck? His voice serious, Aaron knew that Mesa was not skilled at dealing with these matters. This kin of his always harbored unrealistic utopian illusions about many things, often making it difficult for him to make certain decisions. But Aaron had no intention of changing this, he simply chose to step forward and handle these problems for him. After all, these illusions might be one of the reasons why Mesa had come here. Without them, he might have never risked the danger to save his kin, whom he had not seen in decades, and would have given up everything early to live as the chosen one of God. In comparison, Aaron was much more pragmatic. You're right about Pharaoh's army being powerful, but with all due respect, Lord Aaron, there seems to be a flaw in what you've said. Perhaps you should use you instead of we to describe us. Stay updated via novel bin.com. With a tone of irony, a young man spoke out. As far as I know, Lord Mesa, who comes from afar, possesses some extraordinary abilities. Even able to infiltrate Pharaoh's royal palace, being wanted and yet undying. We might possibly die under the blades of Pharaoh's army, but you likely will not. Though, until your arrival, I never knew I would have to face life and death crises. But this is the revelation given by God. Speaking solemnly, Mesa claimed loudly, this is the omen God revealed to me in the flames, that the all gods of Egypt will rain down divine punishment upon us. Yes, Lord Mesa, you've mentioned this early on. With a sneer, the young man continued, but thinking about it from another angle, perhaps it is your arrival that has brought us divine punishment. Just like before, drinking the water sent by Pharaoh, have I not survived to this day? His words unapologetic, the young man's sharp remarks indeed garnered the agreement of many. The future might be promising, and if possible, no one would wish to live as a slave forever. This is why they readily believed Mesa at first. But one can't live on hope alone. Even though many still supported Mesa, the pressure, invisible yet slowly mounting, had gathered. Seeing this scene, Aaron sighed inwardly. He had argued before that those who attribute natural disasters and suffering to the gods ought to be killed, or at the very least expelled. Even the solution was simple: poison the water supplied by Pharaoh, causing those who drink it to fall ill. Then, the faithful would only need to drink the water provided by that lady from the fountain to heal. While the faithless could only await death. This could further stir the Hebrews' gratitude toward God and their united hatred against Pharaoh, unwittingly allowing the enemy to cleanse them thoroughly. But Mesa refused, as he believed that the faithless could still be reformed and should not be written off so easily. However, to be honest, Aaron didn't dismiss the value of reform, it just required ample time, which they did not have. Moreover, how could God, so far in the heavens, always perceive the hearts of men? Pushing his chaotic thoughts aside, Aaron stepped forward and asked the young man calmly. Chapter 674-236 Sacrifice and Poem _2. Then what do you plan to do? Tell Pharaoh, the Hebrews do not have the power to do these things, and you are willing to take refuge in the embrace of the bizarre Egyptian deities. And then do you think he will let you go, sparing you and your followers from the labor of building the city? If you think so, then you might as well go and do it, I certainly won't stop you. You say it casually, but the trouble has already been brought by you all. How can it be avoided? It's just that since you have created the problem, you must be able to solve it. He raised his hand and pointed upwards. The young man pointed to the clouds in the sky outside. The city is for all of us to build, but this heavy rain, you have to take responsibility for resolving it. Isn't the so-called power of God supposed to be manifested right here? You are right, this matter I will resolve. Interrupting Aaron's words, Messa spoke calmly. Descending from the wooden platform, Messa walked through the crowd, all the way outside the house, and stood in the midst of the heavy rain. The wind and rain soaked his clothes, and streams of water, as if filled with water, flowed over his body. Although many people did not understand him, Messa was not angry, but only felt sad for them. You cannot understand the existence of God, that is normal, because you have not received a divine revelation like I have. But I still hope you can understand, because that is your only chance to survive. Rip. With a sharp tool, he sliced open his palm, and the fresh blood, mingling with the rainwater, fell onto the staff. This holy artifact, gifted by God, would become stronger with the disasters that befell the Hebrews, but its current strength was still insufficient to contain this natural calamity. Aaron had suggested that he cleanse the faithless, partly hoping to help increase the power of this holy artifact. But for Messa, if there was a choice, he would rather bear the disaster himself. God said he was more important than the entire Hebrew people, so the harm he suffered should also be tantamount to the harm the entire Hebrew people suffered. Hum. A hum sounded, and as the fresh blood touched the staff, indeed, a force was activated. Visible to the naked eye, golden and silver patterns intertwined along the body of the serpent staff. As if it had drawn something in, the holy artifact suddenly radiated light. And Messa too felt a surge of power, as if he held omnipotence in his grasp. Omnipotence. Merely an illusion. But stopping the heavy rain should be well within reach. He looked up at the sky, his pale hand lifting the scepter, and Messa thrust the scepter into the ground. The next moment, the 10-eye spring water, previously brimming with life force, instantly dried up, and the scepter, like a plant, instantly took root upon touching the ground. In an instant, the plant that the scepter had become shot up from the ground, evolving into a gigantic tree with a canopy that shielded dozens of miles. The heavy rain was instantly blocked above the giant tree, and beneath it, the climate returned to normal. Cough cough. That should be enough. A soft cough. Although Messa's body, at over 80 years of age, was usually healthy, he now felt unwell. And with the staff turned into a giant tree, he temporarily lost any other means. Aaron, arrange for everyone to build the city. Let's hope Pharaoh keeps his promise. As you wish. Looking up at the giant tree that had sprung up in an instant, Aaron felt somewhat dazed for a moment. Although he had seen Messa's methods before, such an astounding one he was witnessing for the first time. But indeed, the effect was good. Glancing around, Aaron clearly saw a change in the expressions of those around him. Indeed, the majority of people fear power more than they fear virtue. Let's begin. Now, you should have no objections. Suppressing the emotions surging in his heart, Aaron spoke to the young man from before. With the residual spring water to restore strength and the giant tree shielding the sky, building the city might just be achievable. Meanwhile, on the slopes outside the city of Memphis, Messa had first encountered Isis here, and he had even come back to this place afterward, wanting to thank this righteous person for her help. Unfortunately, he never saw her again. However, in reality, Isis had never left. Messa could not find her simply because she did not wish to meet with him. I really didn't expect it. Could that staff actually possess such power? Previously, Shu's fall indeed made the power that descended upon it stronger, but it shouldn't have been able to perform such a divine miracle so suddenly. The injuries suffered by the Hebrews could actually empower it. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. Isis felt that perhaps there was indeed some secret within these people's bloodlines. And Messa, from his bloodline to his soul, was full of secrets. However, the birth of the Hebrews occurred after she had transferred her ka that carried her authority, and without her authority, she naturally had no way to perceive the deeper mysteries. She also wondered about that woman from the alien realm. What bloodline did the godly child she carried belong to, and what status did it hold in the alien realm? But no matter what, this all seemed very much like a blood sacrifice ritual. Using their flesh and blood to strengthen the power of this God-given scepter might have been the Great One's original plan. He didn't include himself in his calculation, but this did not affect his success. The more Hebrews died, the stronger the power Messa possessed, the less likely he was to die. And perhaps he, himself, might hold some special secret. Therefore, he agreed to Messa's wish to save his own people because he knew that the vast majority of those people were sacrifices for his very self. Sigh. Never mind, this isn't something I should be concerned with. He's the enemy I should be dealing with now. Thoth, gently shaking her head, Isis disappeared in a flash. After a while, she arrived at the city walls of Heliopolis. But as soon as she arrived, she sensed streams of divine power descending from the sky, and the magic power she was familiar with was converging from all directions. Thoth, who had taken her place among the 9 pillars spirit, the wisdom of Ra, was performing a divine descending here. Isis could even stop him now, but it was pointless. The course of a chess game allows you to capture the piece after the opponent makes a move, but not to interrupt them before they do so. If you do that, the opponent can simply take out another chess piece. So Isis just waited on the city walls, sitting and awaiting Thoth's arrival. Discover exclusive content at novel bin.com. Clang. Whoosh. As time slowly passed, at a certain moment, the sun was directly overhead, and the previously dense clouds scattered to reveal a hole. Sunlight shone into the holy city, like a pillar of light descending from the sky. When the sun god came down from heaven to earth, breathed life into the nostrils of people, they stood up. When the sun god came again to earth, granting people reason, they built cities and tilled the fields. Praise you, your beauty is unmatched, your light illuminates the earth. You rise from the east, your radiance shines upon the whole world. Great God, your power is infinite, your wisdom unparalleled. You created all things, you rule everywhere. Praise you, you are our creator, our protector. We pray to you, may you bless us with peace. Praise you, your name will be remembered forever, your glory will endure forever. We will praise you forever, we will always cherish you. On the earth, songs praising the sun god rose and fell in waves. At the forefront of the crowd, a person in a gorgeous priest's robe danced to a song pleasing to the god. The whole ceremony was as if not Thoth, but Ra himself was descending. It's true, in the eyes of mortals, Shu is the breath of Ra. Thoth is his wisdom. In this world, in fact, only Amun-Ra Autumn is the source of everything, and all other deities are his creations. Without judgment, Isis sat obliquely on the city battlements. She watched the temple's divine light growing more and more splendid, silently waiting for Thoth's arrival. Chapter 675 to 237, Inspiration and Understanding. Ding, ding ding dang, woo. Within the solemn and majestic temple, bells, drumbeats, and the melody of oboes played in harmony. Under the watchful eyes of numerous musicians and devotees, Chasm danced the ritual dance for summoning the deity, calling for the descent of Law's wisdom. Quote. Your light illuminates every face, yet no one knows, through thousands and tens of thousands of years, you are the fervent source of new life. Quote. The truth of language, the peace of the heart, come forth to sip from your light, for you are yesterday, today, also tomorrow. Quote. Praise you, La Deity, you awaken life from its slumber. You rise, shine, and display your glorious visage. Millennia have passed, we cannot count them all, millennia will come, and your light will shine eternal. The ancient poem, a depiction of the dead's devout praises to the sun, transmitted in the rituals of the undead book. Under the sacred melody, in the heart of the temple, a cocoon of light became clearer and more transparent. It had originally been a statue of a deity brought here, having been worshipped in Thoth's temple for 1,000 years. But now, it had been placed at the core of the ceremony, about to undertake the descent of the deity's will. Crack, crack, crack. The crisp sound of cracking emerged from nothing. The shell peeled off, turning into fragments that dissipated in the air, and the scene within the cocoon gradually revealed itself. An animal resembling a baboon stretched its curled body and transformed at an extremely fast pace, almost visible to the naked eye. The fur receded, the body shrank, and in the blink of an eye, the baboon transformed into a middle-aged man dressed in a white robe, holding a book in his hand. Thoth, the god of wisdom of Hemenu, the scribe of La Deity, the creator of writing, and even in the mortal realm, there were mortals who worshipped him as the moon goddess. With the deity's statue located in the mortal realm and the power of magic, this new 9-pillar deity finally managed to tear off a part of his ba and cast it into the mortal realm. Step. Chasm, you have done well. Stay connected through novel bin.com. Standing on the flagstones of the temple, Thoth took a breath of the moist air and praised with a smile. It is my honor to welcome your descent, your highness. The mortal realm has not heard the will of the deity for too long, even Heliopolis was once desolate. It is an honor for all the devotees in Upper and Lower Egypt to receive Law's oracle and welcome your descent. With a respectful bow, as the most loyal devotee of La deity, Chasm's behavior was impeccable. And the surrounding devotees, with feverish expressions mixed with a bit of shame, undoubtedly proved his words. Many of them had left the holy city because of the disappearance of the gods and had only recently returned here, and then they witnessed Thoth's divine descending. Nevertheless, Chasm, you have always remained here, and La deity remembers your achievements. Gazing over the kneeling devotees, Thoth's eyes paused on Chasm. A flicker passed through Thoth's eyes, but in the end, he simply offered praise. At this moment, a continuous flow of elemental power in the air was being devoured by Thoth like a black hole, becoming a part of him, replenishing this empty shell. This was a capability brought by taking over some of the magic divine authority, and while a deity sent him to prevent Isis from interfering. Currently, only his incarnation among the 9 pillar deities could exert enough power in the mortal realm to prevent that traitor from meddling in the conflict between the gods and the outer realm's deities. Your task is over, Chasm, I do not need your service. Go and do what you must, and when the gods achieve victory, you shall receive a reward beyond imagining. Through the years that have passed, the monarchs of the mortal realm have built lofty golden towers for themselves, vainly seeking the care of the god of the dead to accomplish the miracle of resurrection, but most of them are deluded. However, with the achievements you have made, perhaps you deserve such a reward. Speaking indifferently, Thoth walked out of the temple. His gaze drifted towards the city walls, as if sensing the presence lingering there. Isis, his target for this mission, was also the one among the 9 pillar gods he found the most enigmatic. Among the gods, she was the guardian of natural life and magic. Among mortals, she was the friend of slaves, sinners, artisans, and the oppressed, and also listened to the prayers of the rich, maidens, aristocrats, and rulers. No one knew what was in her mind. In fact, until the day La deity suddenly declared her guilty, Thoth did not think Isis would just stand by idly. Soon after, news of her death came, and only when magic's power fell into his hands, did he somewhat incredulously accept this reality. But now it seemed that everything was just her ruse, she had already made her choice long ago. Whoosh! Without hesitation, Thoth soared into the sky. He had no intention of harming La deity's palace. Since touching the power of magic, Thoth had uncovered many secrets he hadn't noticed before. Yet he had only been in control for 1,000 years. Now Thoth was going to intercept Isis, but if possible, he also wanted to learn something else from her. Praise La deity, praise the mind of the god. Following Thoth's departing figure, Chasm murmured a tribute to the deity. While the devout devotees knelt in prayer, expressing their devotion in their own ways. But just then, at Chasm's side, his well-known apprentice Iba looked around at the devout devotees and stepped forward to ask in a low voice. High priest, what shall we do next? What else can we do but spread the glory of deity to the devotees, tell them that the current disasters are because the gods are battling the evil enemy, and that the gods will surely be victorious? What could be the problem with that? Chapter 676 to 237, Inspiration and Understanding _2. Faintly opening his mouth, Chasm was quite satisfied with Iba, at least when it came to acknowledging his responsibilities during work. However, other aspects still needed guidance. I understand, he said. Hesitating for a moment, Iba nodded in agreement. Chasm noticed his confusion but still chose not to explain. Find adventures at Novel Bin. Com. Not long ago, the envoy he had sent to convey the divine prophecy to the pharaoh returned again. The envoy, fulfilling his duties, informed the pharaoh of the divine descending's beginning and end and conveyed the prophecy again, to annihilate those mortals with sin blood, then brought back the pharaoh's indifferent response. Chasm was aware that Ramses would not come to the holy city, but like the previous time, aside from delivering the prophecy, the envoy also brought back some news from the city of Memphis that had not been disclosed. Last time, the envoy told me that the entity opposing all gods was called the creator of all spirits. Eternal and sacred, to whom all spiritual beings in this world belong. Such a broad description still feels imprecise. However, just by hearing it, he seems different from Apep, the enemy of the godla in the myths. He is a rational and authoritative deity previously unheard of. And this time, the envoy told me that those Hebrews have created a fountain containing life, which helped them survive the previous disaster. Silently noting this down, Chasm planned to do nothing. As a loyal follower of the god La, he was soon to spread the joy of divine descending to other believers. Considering the wisdom of La, the great god Thoth would surely be able to easily resolve troubles, allowing Egypt to return to the dominion of all gods, and forever enjoy tranquility and peace. Well, at the very least, it wouldn't be like the god Shu, right? Looking up slightly, Chasm gazed toward the sky. However, at that moment, with the ritual ending, the cloud ripped apart by the sun's light returned to normal. Compared to Memphis, Heliopolis was far from the core, so the heavy rain was still brewing and had yet to fall. Father, High Priest, I still have some doubts, was what I saw before really just an illusion? The voice came from beside him, just as Iba hesitated again before leaving to carry out his orders. Although he had already received an explanation, he was still reluctant to believe it. Since the disaster broke out, he frequently saw some strange sights. Like the 9 pillars standing unyielding in the sky, like invisible forces filling the heavens and earth, stirring up great winds and dark clouds. And like seeing one of those pillars abruptly collapse, accompanied by a shrieking curse resounding in his ears. Even Thoth's divine descending seemed more vivid to him than to others. Yet Chasm told him not to dwell on those, but rather to focus on doing what a priest of La should do. Those magnificent sights, they were all false. That was certainly an illusion, Iba. Although the sorcerers of the old age claimed that mortals inherently gifted with high intuition could see things normal people cannot. You've always been interested in this. But how do you compare to me? Chasm asked calmly. I am, of course, far inferior. He sighed. How could he possibly compare to his father? Unable to tell if it was disappointment or relief, Iba gave a slight bow. Then I will attend to my duties now, High Priest. Go ahead. With a slight nod, Iba's form soon vanished into the distance. Chasm watched his student disappear from view, and then knelt down as did other followers both inside and outside the temple. Silently praying to the god La. His movements were standard and graceful, formed from countless practices, prompting anyone who saw to commend his devotion. La God, may your light forever illuminate the earth just as it eternally illuminates the sky. All sin shall turn to dust, lies and deceit will have nowhere to hide. He had sinned, committed the sin of lies. After all, a person's natural intuition has nothing to do with their status or accomplishments, and in this regard, he was far inferior to his own son and could not see the things he spoke of. Yet, as one of Law's most promising followers, Chasm considered his handling to be beyond reproach. They were mere delusions of a young man, how could they be real? Allowing such blasphemous words to be known by others would be the greatest offense to the deity. Such matters were best kept between the two of them, father and son. Whoosh. The sound of breaking air started loud but gradually faded, unable to suppress the reaction to the flight. Thoth used magic to mobilize the invisible wind to lift himself. But this time it was much more difficult than before. He knew why, because Shu had died, and the authority over the atmosphere and wind had also been taken away. If not for deities like Set, the god of storms and deserts, still existing, the authority associated with Hemanu and the wind would probably have been even more violent. However, thinking about this, Thoth couldn't help but feel a flicker of emotion in his heart, unsure whether it was envy or pity. In today's world of Hemanu, the 9 pillar gods confront the outer gods high above, but in reality, as a world, the number of deities in Upper and Lower Egypt, although not as many as Chaos, is actually far more than just those 9. Frog gods, fly gods such as those animal deities, the protective gods of each nome, and the river gods and other nature gods, they are all part of the deities of Hemanu. Yet, just as only those with intermediate divine power or above in Chaos could sense the turbulence in the Sea of Origin. Among the gods of Upper and Lower Egypt, apart from the 9 pillar gods, the other weaker deities had already lost consciousness in their stupor. They would probably have to wait until this war ends to have a chance of waking up. We've avoided one crisis, but the future can only be decided by others. Whether it is a sleep from which they never awaken, or they awaken after the danger has passed, no one knows. Drifting along. This is the original sin of the weak. With a calm expression, Thoth thought of Happy, the Nile god. If it weren't for his godhood attribute being overly regional, he would likely be sitting as one of the players on the chessboard by now. This ancient deity, born during the era of autumn, was no different in face of great catastrophe. It's right ahead. Heliopolis was not as big as imagined, and in the blink of an eye, the city walls were before him. Thoth stopped in his tracks, looking at that familiar figure, who seemed even more youthful and beautiful than 1,000 years ago. Isis, long time no see. Speaking flatly, Thoth's power locked onto the opponent in front of him. Divine power was abundant. From the limit of her Ba's storage of divine power, she still had at least 80% power, indicating that helping the Sin people did not drain her too much. You have betrayed the beings of Hemenu to embrace the outer gods. By Law's command, I will stop you from interfering with this war that concerns the world, and give you the judgment you should have received 1,000 years ago. As his voice fell, the legendary book used to create writing floated up beside Thoth. Language, wisdom, and magic, these were always a perfect trifecta of authority. And unlike La, who used reincarnation as an efficient means to accommodate new strength, Thoth was using this book to carry the power of magic, gradually integrating it into himself to become another Ka of his own. The elements of the surrounding world were mobilized by him, helped trivially by some divine power brought down during divine descending. Assembling into form, Thoth appeared murderously inclined, yet on the opposite side, resting sideways on the rampart, facing the imminent attack, Isis merely smiled lightly. Come on, you're just an incarnation with not much divine power. With your mastery of magic, it's still not enough to use it to compete against divine power. You might disturb me, but it's not possible for you to truly kill me. The outcome of this war is not something we can influence. Stretching lazily, Isis looked at the increasingly heavy clouds and casually invited. Thoth, you are also considered to have split your Ba and descended to the mortal realm. Then you know how I used the power of magic to sever connections, separating myself from my authority, and faking my own death. Without speaking, Thoth seemed unmoved. The air around exploded with bursts of crackling sounds, as if he was fighting the other party with magic. It's a very interesting piece of magic, a byproduct of my research on a ritual, originally meant to be used against La. Not knowing that she had successfully backstabbed La in the original mythology, Isis herself didn't think her research would succeed. Contrarily, she believed that this byproduct from her research was truly valuable. Come, let me tell you about it. The progress of magic lies in sharing, right? With a still smiling face, Isis drew a symbol in the air as if the person opposite her was not an opponent but a disciple seeking her knowledge. Chapter 677-238 Black Tide. Boom! In the sky, storms collided with lightning, and molten lava obstructed the rivers. The tremendous vibrations spread hundreds of miles, making the mortals in Heliopolis pray to the deities with even more fervor. However, in reality, the pages in his hands swiftly turned, a mass of repeated text flickering before his eyes. Thoth had devoted most of his energy to the complicated runes in front of him, maintaining only a small part of his vigilance. After all, he did not trust his enemy so easily, nor would he truly give her a chance to escape. The battle between worlds does not necessarily correlate directly with losing to an outer god, at least not for Thoth, for whom this wasn't the first option. This ritual, life, spirit. It's a pity La did not entrust the authority over her life to me, otherwise perhaps I could have deciphered its mysteries myself. Explore more adventures at Novel Bin. Com. Not necessarily. From what Isis has shown, does she actually believe that including all gods, our souls are inherently in an imperfect state? The soul being divided into Ka and Ba is already flawed. No, she even feels that gods having souls is a flaw in itself. Though he had only just engaged with it, with the help of special divine authority, Thoth had understood the principles of Isis's ritual. This former goddess of life and magic seemed to have a very different understanding from ordinary people. She believed that the more things coalesce and purify, the more perfect they become, and the more they disperse and chaos ensues. The more inferior they are. Only a completely unified and pure spirit is a perfect spirit. Only a deity that unifies spirit and flesh is a true deity. In her view, if this could be achieved, deities would no longer be limited by aging and death but could attain true eternity. This was a bold hypothesis, and Thoth did not know if it was right or wrong. Existing in Hemenu, even as the god of wisdom, he did not realize that chaos's deities were unified in this manner. They did not have separate bodies and spirits. Their divine bodies existed in a form that possessed both material and energy, changing states with subjective will. He also didn't know that in the future Eastern mythology, it was believed their ancient practitioners also thought that the cultivation of the soul was about refining the yin residue, returning to pure yang, and the legendary longevity men were no exception. They possessed a state of gathered to form, dispersed to formlessness, owning two different kinds of bodies. Thoth only knew, his divine authorities subtly told him, this method might truly be a righteous path to perfecting oneself. And Isis's ritual was centered on this principle. In her philosophy, the body is one, the torso and limbs of a person are not connected by any medium, hence the spirit should also be unified. Ka and Ba should not be separate. But considering that the all spirits of Hemenu were inherently like this, Isis could not merge the two postnatally. Facing an imminent life and death crisis, she simply chose a different path. A person's body can heal when injured, so naturally, the spirit can also be healed when it is wounded, he thought. However, whether the injury can recover depends on the severity. Forcefully severing the connection between Ba and one's own Ka is like tearing one's body in half, an undoubtedly fatal act. But if the one doing all this also possesses the authority of life, then the outcome might not necessarily be the same. Runes flickered before his eyes, and Thoth couldn't help but admire Isis's audacity. Since the spirit is naturally divided and cannot be unified postnatally, why not use external force to annihilate one part and then regenerate a new, connected other part on the remaining half? This newly born spirit would then be unified, possessing both the characteristics of Ka and the capabilities of Ba. Or rather, it would be the complete spirit itself. At this moment, Thoth felt that if it were not for external threats and Isis's current choice of betrayal, with this discovery, she might have been able to obtain the godhood of the soul and further perfect the order of the world, completing the unification of all life's souls. At that time, she would have garnered countless followers in the favor of the world's will, with the existence of all spirits being the source of her strength. If she then unified life and magic using the soul as the primary subject and devoured his wisdom, Isis might truly ascend beyond a true god and become as powerful in existence as La. Moreover, La's strength is because the son of the Hemenu world is inherently powerful, born as rebirth, the supreme of the stars, a confluence of light, fire, purification, and other authorities. If Isis succeeded, she would be creating a divine authority not inferior to the sun, by piecing together her own authorities. This kind of miracle is almost unimaginable. It's hard to say. After all, who would choose to give up their authority and annihilate half of their own soul? If not facing the calamity of death, shaking his head slightly, Thoth could only state that fate was such a coincidence. Had there been no invasion from beyond, there likely wouldn't have been Isis's ritual. Even if she had more advanced thoughts, she wouldn't have done something that could lead to death. But with the invasion, she invented this ritual, and as a result, she missed the chance for promotion. Chapter 678-238 Black Tide _2. Faintly, it was as if fate was stabilizing everything. And all coincidences were predestined. Whatever fate may be, that's a matter of the past. However, from this ritual, if I also wish to complete this step, I would need the assistance of life divine power. But I don't know how much divine power is needed for a deity to complete this step, so I must ensure that your remaining divine power is not depleted, right? With a calm expression, dozens of pages flew out of the book in Thoth's hands, scattering into the surrounding void. It looked like an open conspiracy. Even if Isis completed her explanation of the ritual, he still could not harm her, because if the outer god once again attacked his Ka in the Sea of Origin, he might face the same situation that Isis had faced before. It's true that without her interference, the outer god is less likely to target the all gods, but what if it does? That's why he must leave a way out. However, Thoth was not opposed to this, for his task was to prevent Isis from intervening in the disaster created by the nine-pillar gods again. Not to kill her personally. Then what he was doing now was very good. The void was locked down, and Thoth presented himself with integrity and righteousness. Not fighting is acceptable, but don't go anywhere else. Otherwise, instead of letting you use the only remaining divine power to assist the outer god, I'd rather consume it myself. If I can't use it, then neither can anyone else. It seems you are still somewhat loyal to La, and the death of Shu doesn't impact you that much. With a slight lift of her brows, Isis noticed the changes around her. Slowing down her actions, she began to assess the method used to seal the space. It could be the help of La, after all, he had mastered the power of infinite space. The ceiling appeared profound and mysterious, hard to break through once more. So, you want to stay here with me? That makes sense. This option is at least safe. Just stay here quietly. The victory or defeat between the outer god and our realm is ultimately not something that a Shu can decide on. Don't think I will grovel and beg for mercy before the door is broken down like you did. I am just making preparations in advance. After all, even if we win, nobody wants to end up like Shu, but rather hopes to live to see the fruits of victory. Speaking calmly, he did not voice the last sentence, but Isis understood his meaning. The words of Thoth at this moment somehow also represented the prevailing views of other deities. Although Shu had died, they did not intend to betray God La. Putting aside the strife between worlds, they still had hope of winning this match, so at this moment, the gods were merely making preparations for, just in case. Besides, as Thoth said, victory or defeat was still uncertain. But for Shu, he was definitely defeated beyond recovery. Sasa. Hemenu's size was far less than that of Chaos, but the grand fight between the two deities did not affect the entire world. However, while the battle itself was insignificant, the power wielded by the deities could make an impact. In the mortal world, cosmic changes occurred in a moment. Along the Nile River basin was a downpour that stretched beyond sight. The rain fell like pillars, causing the recently lowered water levels to rise again. In the deserts far from the riverbanks, there were clear skies and nothing but sandstorms raging and wild beasts howling. Sasa. Faint noises arose from beneath the desert. Ever since the day the cosmos shifted, the edge of the desert had gradually gathered countless insects and wild beasts. They assembled there but showed no signs of moving, devouring each other in hunger, as if waiting for something, their numbers growing ever larger. Until this day, the far-off heavy rain seemed to divide the world into two realms of water and sand, and along this dividing edge, a troop of riders was galloping towards here. Tap tap tap. Ho, stop. Continue reading at novel bin, com. At the command, a dozen riders immediately came to a halt. At the forefront of the cavalry, the leader, clad in a white robe adorned with gold ornaments and his long hair wrapped in a headscarf, clearly held a distinguished status, his every move showing his education. In the past years, he must have seen a lot of the world. Yet now, looking at the black dots swarming on the desert, a primal tension surged through his veins. It could be a memory passed down from his ancestors through the bloodline, or perhaps it was an innate fear of densely packed objects. Even though they have always regarded the scarab as a sacred artifact. Aware that these were not enemies, they could not hide the panic in their hearts. This, Your Majesty, is this the army bestowed upon us by the gods? The voice was somewhat unnatural. Beside the leader, a towering warrior clad in armor instinctively gripped the rope tighter. He did not fear death, he had once charged at the forefront of the battlefield. Yet, the prospect of dying from being devoured by countless insects was too cruel. It was not only a matter of the flesh. Such a death was considered the annihilation of the soul as well. There is no need to fear, this must be the god's promise, the army we can use to defeat the Egyptians. Of course, before that, we must first complete the god's mission and kill those cursed by the god, the alien clan. Taking a deep breath, Cash, though unwilling to admit it, might see these as his future soldiers. But could soldiers composed of humans truly fight alongside them? He was not sure, yet, the strength of such an army was likely to be extraordinary. Decades ago, Cash and his subjects, along with all of Nubia, were crushed head-on by Ramses II, the prime monarch of Egypt's 19th dynasty. The Egyptian pharaoh, considered a god among mortals, showed them no mercy as his great army pressed in. From then on, Nubia was forced to submit to the rule of the Egyptian pharaoh, and Ramses II even personally sacrificed Nubian prisoners of war in the Abu Simbel temples to showcase his achievements. Hatred was henceforth sown, but the gap in strength remained insurmountable. Cash had thought there would be no chance for revenge in his lifetime. He only hoped someone would inherit his name, his hatred, and then crush Egypt in the name of Nubia. But who would have thought that at this juncture, the god Amen of Thebes would actually bestow an oracle responding to them? The deity, who traditionally favored the Egyptians, seemed finally weary of their incompetence. He promised the Nubians that as long as they could slaughter to extinction those mortals with sinful lineage, Cash could retain this invincible army until his death, and the gods would recognize Nubia's status, allowing them to march through Upper and Lower Egypt and become the new pharaoh. This is our best chance. Raising his whip, Cash's demeanor firmed. The Egyptians occupy the most beautiful land by the Nile River and are most favored by the gods. Even if all the tribes in the mortal world united, it would be tough to defeat the Egyptian army. But this time it's different. We will not only defeat them militarily, but we will also win the favor of the gods. As long as we complete that mission. Go. Once again moving forward, Cash led the way, with the rest of the cavalry following closely behind. The dark tide in front was drawing closer, and their faces grew uglier by the moment. But if even Cash was willing to move forward, who would dare to retreat? Clop, clop, clop. The horses stopped in front of the black tide, and the delicate sasa sound strained everyone's nerves to the limit. Cash noticed that these tiny creatures seemed to realize his arrival as well. They were watching him, this guest with a special aura. Clang. He drew the long sword from his waist, steadying his trembling arm. His sword pointed to the sky and then slowly glided downwards towards the direction where the clouds were. By the command of the great god Amen, I shall be your commander. We will cross the heavy rain and kill all sources of evil. Now, line up. His voice cracking slightly, Cash watched the dark tide before him anxiously. He did not know if his actions would be of any use, nor did he know if they could understand his demands, but he still made every attempt he could think of. Sasa. After a long stare, just as Cash's courage was nearly retreating, he saw the vast black tide finally changing. The endless, dark wave parted on both sides, as if making way for the sword-bearing king of Nubia. Exhaling lightly, Cash finally let down his guard. He spurred his horse forward, moving along the path cleared by the black tide to the center of this group of ant creatures. Now, they are mine. Feeling as if the sword in his hand became lighter, Cash looked towards the faraway clouds. All forces, forward. Pointing his sword towards the direction indicated by the oracle, Cash swore to the gods that he would not leave a single one alive. Chapter 679-239 Sacrifice. Sasa. Dark tides passed through the curtain of rain, moving in the direction guided by the enigmatic. Countless insects were washed away by the water on the road, yet the continual replenishment was unceasing. Only instinct-driven beasts could be more fearless and aggressive than humans. Under the summoning of the divine aura, they charged into the rain, one after another. Centered around Memphis, the heavy rain did nothing to halt their steps within hundreds of miles. To one side of the dark tide, the waters of the Nile River surged under the rainfall, washing down the soil from both banks. If it weren't for this clearly unreasonable weather phenomenon drawing moisture from beneath the earth, Egypt would likely have faced not just heavy rains but a flood. Of course, the 9 pillar gods wouldn't do such a thing, since under the flood the commoners remained commoners, but the military might not remain the military. If the deterrent of the surrounding military were gone, these mortals would have probably scattered and fled long ago. By then, killing them would have become even more difficult. Popping and crackling. The flames popped and crackled while, on the flat ground, the rudimentary shape of a great city was miraculously being constructed. The progress of the city's construction changed almost daily, the efficiency comparable to modern machinery. Just a few miles from the Hebrews' settlement, 100,000 Egyptian soldiers silently observed from their tents. The miraculous giant trees shielded them from the wind and rain as well, preventing the stationed soldiers from being drenched like soaked chickens. Nevertheless, most soldiers still preferred to stay inside their tents, with only a few sentries dispersed in various directions, monitoring the city's activities every day. Hey, talking to you. Snap out of it. Stop pondering there all the time. There's just the two of us here, can't you talk a bit more? Casually flipping over his clothes that were drying, Wadi was slightly dissatisfied with his partner. There's nothing complicated about the matters of the all gods, if you ask me. You just think too much. Just look at these Hebrews causing quite a stir, but aren't they still contained by us here? If that evil god was as powerful as imagined, we'd probably have been done for long ago. And honestly, Sened, those matters of gods and the pharaoh, what have they got to do with us? These people just want to leave, so let them go. Cough, cough, keep it down. After coughing twice, startled by his partner's audacious words, Sened snapped back to reality. He glared at Wadi, as if such words could be spoken so carelessly. Find more to read on Novel Bin. Calm. It's fine, there's no one else here. In this atrocious weather, anyone remotely important is holed up in their tents. It's just us two dispatched here to keep an eye on those Hebrews. Indifferently, Wadi shrugged and added some more wood to the fire. It was almost humorous. The firewood now had to be dried by fire before use, something Wadi would have previously considered a joke. But now, even though there's no physics or chemistry in Egypt, Wadi still felt he was learning something new. In the typically dry land of Egypt, this was indeed a rare experience. Truthfully, I don't think we need to be here. Those sin people wouldn't dare come out. We are merely sentries, there are tens of thousands more behind us. Do you realize how many tens of thousands are? It's an endless sight. It's said that if it weren't near Memphis, mobilizing such a large army would require several times more slaves to transport supplies, and the entire strength of Egypt would need to be mobilized. Off topic again. Sened, what I'm saying isn't wrong, is it? These issues truly don't concern us much. The gods and the pharaoh need to consider big matters, but how much do those big matters really involve us? If they win, it's just a meal, maybe some extra cash, which I might receive only if I live till then. If they lose, it's merely the Hebrews successfully leaving. Even if they suddenly decided to unite Egypt, then we would just serve under a new ruler. But at least for now, you're not a slave. Frowning slightly, Sened felt his partner's thoughts were indeed dangerous. Did you see those Hebrews? Would you want to be like them? Of course not. Gently shaking his head, Wadi then scoffed coldly. They really do have a miserable life, working from birth till death. But Sened, believe it or not, although they are slaves, those among them of higher status probably live much better than we do. If it really came to that day, I might at least be an experienced soldier. They might even let me lead a team to manage other slaves. Besides, there's no need to think too much. The two of us cannot influence the outcome of the war. Egypt has an unimaginable population, it won't miss one with or without me. At a crucial time, the all-gods would protect us. After all, this war is being conducted under their will. As for me, I'd better live a few more days. As Wadi's words faded, Sened found himself momentarily speechless. He didn't think his partner was right. Just that being dispatched here with no rotation, he felt somewhat resentful inside. Egypt so vast, indeed didn't lack 2 soldiers sent here. But if everyone thought this way, then who would be left to fight the war? Under the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II, the Egyptians in the Nile River basin had undoubtedly become the undisputed masters. No matter how one looked at it, this was a great era. Chapter 680 to 239 Sacrifice _2. Sasa, speak less. This is the will of all gods, we just need to obey. Even if we die in battle, our spirits will be protected by God, and our names will be sung by others after death. Somewhat gloomy, Sened stood up, watching the world under the curtain of rain. Although he didn't want to stay here, he was after all a devout follower of all gods. Even though God did not destroy the sin people immediately, it did not impact his faith. After all, compared to all gods and the pharaoh, his vision was surely not as far-reaching. What is that? Out of the corner of his eye. It seemed like he caught sight of something. Sened pointed into the distance. At his side, Wadi also stood up alertly. Complaints aside, he wouldn't be careless when his life was at stake. Sasa, is that the water turning black? From a distance, Wadi was somewhat uncertain for a moment. The black tide slowly flowing from afar seemed different from other waters. It was heading straight for this city under construction. Explore more at Novel Bin. Calm. In their midst, an Egyptian's camp was situated there, with thousands of soldiers stationed. However, it looked like the rolling black tide had no intention of avoiding, but was instead charging right through. What is this thing? Black but a tide? No, it's an enemy attack. Upon closer inspection, Sened's face suddenly changed. He still couldn't see clearly what the black tide was, but he saw a pair of cavalry standing in the tide. That was definitely something being manipulated, perhaps those were the legendary sorcerers? But no matter. The Egyptian army had not anticipated an attack from behind, they were wholly unprepared. Or rather, in such heavy rain, the guards that should have been in place were hardly doing their duty, only the sentries watching the Hebrews were still trying their best. Quick, let's go back. Quick, let's run. Quote. Exchanging a glance, Sened and Wadi were silent for a moment. I know you were a devout follower, Sened, but you were also worried about the future, weren't you? You don't believe the all-gods are omnipotent. Wadi took a deep breath, attempting to coax a smile. So you want me to desert? No. Shaking his head, Wadi continued, we are going for help. This is clearly an unexpected enemy, we are powerless against it, so we must seek help. After all, we are sentries guarding the Hebrews, not responsible for guarding our rear. If there isn't as much danger over there as we feared, they'll handle the trouble whether we go or not. After all, it's only one troop of cavalry. But if it is really dangerous, then do you really want to risk your life, fulfill duties not yours, and run back to warn them? Eyes signaling, Wadi knew, in Sened's home he was not the only one. Seeing the other's expression, he felt this issue may not be a big one after all. Then light the fire, we have to do something, we hope they see a light. Wadi, you are right, we must seek help. Sure enough, despite some difficulty, but as Sened looked back at the rolling black tide, he still made the decision. He did not know what that was. But honestly, upon making this choice, it felt as though a weight was lifted off his chest. Ding-a-ling-ling. Enemy attack, enemy attack. Whoosh. What enemy attack are the Egyptians coming? On the flat ground, within the city under construction, a sharp whistle suddenly sliced through the sky. To prevent a sudden attack from the Egyptian army, Lord Aaron had already arranged sufficient personnel to be vigilant day and night, even selecting many for continual training. And at this moment, this proved his decision was indeed rational. Ta-ta-ta-ta, Lord Aaron, enemy attack. Pushing open the wooden door, the sentry said with a trembling voice. While originally reviewing the construction plans, Aaron furrowed his brows slightly, feeling a bit surprised. Were the Egyptians attacking? That shouldn't be right. The pharaoh's previous actions seemed more inclined to wear them down slowly, only delivering a fatal blow at the most critical moment. As a result, Aaron had already advised Mesa to abandon any illusions and simply break through with as many people as they could manage, utilizing his scepter. But Mesa had stated he would never willingly abandon these people, to which Aaron had no solution. But now, were the Egyptians unable to sit still? Go on. With a calm tone, under which the young sentry also stabilized a bit. My lord, it was like this, I was originally on the lookout for any unusual movements from the Egyptians. But just a short while ago, I saw, quote. What? Facing changing slightly, Aaron felt as though he was listening to a mythological tale from his childhood. Swarms of snakes, insects, mice, and ants forming into an army, manipulated black tides, thousands of Egyptians, nearly a third wiped out in the blink of an eye, the rest looking hardly capable of resisting. No. Cooling down, suppressing the idea of reprimanding the sentry, Aaron suddenly realized he was now living out a mythological story. A god's followers faced accusations from barbarous nations, enduring trials and tribulations, eventually finding a way out under the prophet's guidance. Since this was a mythology, what else is impossible? Notify the guard to assemble, we must. No, the hastily produced stone spears might injure humans, deal with large beasts, but are useless against those rats and ants. Moreover, as they came from all directions, we can't possibly cope with them. Chapter 681-239 Sacrifice_3. He made a subconscious judgment but quickly overturned it. Aaron pushed the door open and climbed directly onto a simple wooden tower built nearby. Originally used for observing the layout of construction, it was now utilized by Aaron to survey the distant situation. There. That's the enemy he spoke of. Gazing into the distance from a higher vantage point, Aaron could see the scene outside the city. As time passed, the camp of several thousand Egyptians was almost submerged by the tide. Only a few were still holding on, but they appeared to be in their death throes. Enjoy new stories from novel bin.com. Humans possess an absolute advantage when facing a small number of insects, but with such numbers, just looking at them made Aaron's scalp tingle. Let Mesa think of a solution. No, his scepter has transformed into a giant tree, and it shouldn't be disturbed before the city construction is completed. I don't care about this city, but it's better to finish building it. At least that will make Mesa see the Egyptians cannot be trusted, and we must amputate to save the body. Have the men I've just trained man the walls for defense. No, that won't work either. Aside from the fact that the city walls are nowhere near completion, even if they were, what use would they be against those insect wolves? Idea after idea flashed through his mind, only to be dismissed one by one. To counter such clearly supernatural-driven life forms, one could only use the supernatural to fight back. But they hardly had any. It seems we still have something. His gaze shifted, and Aaron looked toward the only remaining spring of life. The spring of life emanated energy, accessible only to the faithful. Any malicious individuals would be turned into mummies. However, the spring was not infinite, its daily yield was just so much. Aaron had known this for some time, but he was also aware of something else. That is, the yield of the spring could actually be increased artificially. Its production needed life energy, and besides the natural recovery each day, there was a second way to solve this. That is, to exchange life for life. Guard, I remember I had you separate those who believe in God from those who don't, right? With a calm demeanor, Aaron inquired. Yes, my lord. Good. Believers, in actuality, are quite varied. Like pan-believers and shallow believers, who can hardly be said to be particularly devout, mostly, believing just a little. Yet even so, many Hebrews were unwilling to take a leap of faith. Aaron felt that Mesa was too merciful. He might be suitable as a spiritual leader, but certainly not fit to wield power over a nation fraught with internal and external troubles. Let's not tell him about this for now. Some of the faithless, I suppose God would understand my decision. Stepping down from the tower, Aaron made his decision. For the future of the Hebrews, for the glory of God, for victory and justice, there always needs to be some sacrifice. Mesa doesn't need to know about this. I will bear the infamy instead. With enough life energy from the spring of life, this substance that could directly drain the life of pagans ought to be able to deal with those insects. Only hoping the gods of Egypt wouldn't produce any more surprises. Indeed, relying solely on these worldly beings won't resolve the issue with the Hebrews, nor will it suffice to prompt him to act, remarked a voice above the sea of origin. Sweat nearly soaked the clothing of the sky goddess as she hovered above the sea. Tefnut and Set had acted in succession, but the outer god had not shown the slightest intention of intervening, instead observing their actions. Could it be? He wouldn't be planning to leave the opportunity to them, would he? The Hebrews are facing a crisis, won't you consider saving them? I will shake the stars. As if certain of her grasp, the sky goddess forced a smile and said, fallen stars will fall from the sky, striking the tree that withstood the torrential rain, turning it into dust. The outer god will surely act then. We don't have anything to worry about. The game has only progressed to a small extent. He wouldn't just sit by and watch the Hebrews be decimated, right? No one responded to her. The remaining all gods were nervously watching the ground, especially Tefnut, Thoth, and Set, who had taken action together. The logic was clear, but who could know whether the outer god abides by such logic? Let's hope he does, although the gods of Hemanu were fated to perish. They were still quite distant from death. Chapter 682-240 Earth and Water. Rumble, rumble, thunder resounded in bursts, as if the heavens were trembling in anger. In the distance, the lapping of the Nile River was faintly audible. Within the dwelling place of the Hebrews, only the most central area was seldom trodden upon. This was the root system of a great tree and also the place where Mesa prayed. At this time every day, Mesa would silently pray to God, sharing the voice of his heart each time he made a decision. This is my choice. Many do not understand me, even Aaron does not understand my choice. Yet Almighty and Eternal Lord, when I gave up everlasting life before you, I had already seen clearly into my own soul. Despite having been forced to flee Egypt for 40 years, from the day I left, not a day has passed that I haven't regretted my impotence. So I ultimately returned here. Only wish that your radiance is cast upon the earth, as it is in the sky, allowing every devout believer to find salvation. Number 1 would disturb Mesa during his prayers, whether they believed in God or not. The mystery and nobility of a priest were ingrained in the bones of people of this era, and without this, Mesa, as an outsider who had left for 40 years, would not have easily gained the trust of his tribespeople. The one who can communicate with God is the most revered existence in this era, and people revere this specialness just like they revere God, whether they are Egyptians or Hebrews. The sacrifices lasted a long time, and beneath the tree transformed from the serpent staff, Mesa spoke at length. Each time, he anticipated that the sacred fire would spark before him, thus receiving divine revelation once more. Yet until the moment he stood up, nothing happened. God did not respond to him as if the divine revelation of the past had already said enough. Mesa was willing to trade his own immortality and everything else for the redemption of others, and God had already given his answer early on. For one thing, he does not need to speak a second time. Perhaps this is destiny. My choice is also within God's expectations. Perhaps when God saw me, he knew I was destined not to choose everlasting life. For the past and the future are before his eyes. Quietly rising, Mesa sighed. The great tree he had planted with his own hands was right before him. It could not only shelter from the rain above but also dispel most severe weathers, such as storms and heavy snow, and even stabilize the land, as its roots prevented fissures and molten lava. With it, the strength of gods of Egypt ceased to work, and he too could calmly proceed with the casting of the city, waiting for the pharaoh to release them after the covenant was fulfilled. This is the sacred artifact bestowed by God. Even though it has already grown so tall, it continues to draw nutrients, growing taller and taller. Growing taller and taller? His expression shifted, and Mesa seemed to realize something. He gazed at the great tree, which seemed indeed to have grown slightly taller than before. But how could this great tree, formed by the strength of the fountain and the serpent staff, grow taller out of nowhere? Is it that the strength of the fountain has increased, or has the strength of the serpent staff become stronger? What's happening? Has another disaster come? Aaron should have dealt with it, but why hasn't he come to tell me? Boom! Before he could finish, the earth trembled, and the massive tree shuddered violently, nearly causing Mesa to lose his balance. Find your next read on novel bin. Calm. Sounds of impact came from the canopy, and little rain seeped through the cracks, spattering mud on the ground. Mesa looked up, but the dense foliage blocked his view, and for a moment, he could not discern what had struck the tree. But through the connection with the serpent staff, Mesa knew that this attack came from the sky. But the attack from the sky just happened. Why does it continue to grow? What's happening outside? Isn't Aaron out there protecting the people? The change in anything comes from a source of strength. At this moment, Mesa realized, although the great tree was under attack, it was still growing taller. A strange sense of joy in being replenished inexplicably rose from the bottom of his heart. However, Mesa's heart was filled with only anxiety at this time. He was not clear about what happened outside, but now it seemed they were simultaneously under attack from the sky and the ground. This world, still unwilling to let him go. God has manifested my destiny. Among those devout believers, of the able-bodied, 1/3 shall perish, of the women and children, 1/2 shall perish, of the elderly and the sick, 7 in 10 shall perish. Is this destiny then? What significance does my doing have? No, it is meaningful. At least, I will make more people become devout believers. Confusion flashed and disappeared, as Mesa's eyes regained their resolve. Gazing at the increasingly gigantic tree, he stretched out his hand, attempting to control its branches. Countless branches immediately began to whip about, some reaching upwards as if to slap at meteors, others stretching outward as if trying to attack enemies. Mesa issued a command to it, to destroy all approaching threats. The marvel of creation began to stir, moving like mountains shifting their shells. And at the same moment, outside of the protective embrace of the great tree, people around Memphis could see the dense clouds in the sky torn apart, creating large holes. Meteors were falling, heading towards the sinners on earth. Spare me. I will convert, spare me. Hiss. La is the God of all gods, the source of everything. You shall all receive divine punishment. Stop your futile resistance. We are born with the original sin, and the suffering we endure is merely the process of atonement. Once cleansed of the disaster. Hiss. Where is the great prophet? Where is Mesa? Spare me. Don't you always say that all Hebrews are brothers and sisters who should love and protect one another? Lies. Liar. Chapter 683 to 240, Earth and Water _2. Peef. Lord Aaron. Why would you do this, allowing us to die? What good does it do you? I can obey you. Hiss. Evil God, may you die a horrible death. Hiss. The earth will be soaked with sin and blood, and you surely will pay the price. No one can escape, no one can. Standing on a mound, Aaron listened to the incessant pleadings, wails, curses, and angry shouts around him, his expression unchanged. Before the city was built, a moat had been planned, but water had not yet been diverted into it. However, the heavy rain had solved that, as the moat's channel blocked the accumulating water from other areas. Now, a short canal leading directly out of the city was being urgently dug by thousands. After all, even if the spring of life produced enough water, relying on bare hands for transport was insufficient. Besides, given the size of the spring, even with more water, it might not hold back the massive dark tide. Still, as terrifying as those creatures might be, individually, their strength remained insignificant. Even diluted, the spring's water was sufficient for use. Speed up the progress, pay no mind to what they're saying. If they had devout hearts, they would have proven it by now. The gods do not need to coerce their faith through slaughter, this is merely a personal decision of mine. His voice calm, Aaron gazed at the increasingly pure and sacred spring nourished by life in front of him. Sinful blood nurtured holy flowers, beneath the healing divine spring lay a ground littered with corpses. Perhaps behind every luminescence, such was the case, be it by choice or force. At least, that's the case for humans. Descending the slope, Aaron figured the Egyptians must be nearly dead by now. Whether his plan would succeed would be confirmed by what followed. Having devoured so much of his kin's flesh and blood, facing an alien clan, it only seemed right they should die in greater numbers. You have been trained for a while, though the enemy is not human, we must still take up arms to protect our lives and possessions. Soon after, as Aaron approached the city walls, the surging black tide was already close at hand. Draw swords. God is with me. God is with me. Outside the city, mounted on his horse, Cash whispered a prayer, then gazed into the distance at the barely formed buildings. He saw the guards standing ready, well, he'd rather call them armed rabble. Neither their equipment nor their training seemed adequate in the least. I thought the enemy foretold by the oracle was formidable, turns out they're merely these insignificant sin people. I've heard of them, a clan cursed by the god La. Their ancestors committed great sins, it's surprising the Egyptians haven't dealt with them. The blade dripped with blood, the last remnants of an Egyptian aristocrat Cash had personally slain. Though the oracle prevented him from seeking trouble with the Egyptians directly at this time. Since they were in his way, he might as well eradicate them. The brief battle had undoubtedly proven that even well-trained soldiers were no match under his vast army. As for those called Hebrews, sin people, there was certainly no difference. They didn't even have decent leather armor, nor enough weapons. Stone spears. Are we living in ancient times? Ha ha ha. Cash's words triggered a burst of laughter. Despite knowing these insect-like legions wouldn't harm them, each Nubian still harbored quite a bit of negative emotion. The recent massacre of the Egyptians allowed them a slight release, but it was far from enough. Prepare yourselves, gentlemen, let's complete the god's mission soon, and then break through Memphis. I want to present Ramses II as a sacrifice to the gods to prove my capabilities. After that, everything in the city will be ours. Raising his sword, Cash willed the rolling black tide to surge forward. He saw the city walls, the moat, and the vigilant guards, but none of these mattered against the overwhelming numbers. How many lives the desert contained, no one knew. But for Cash, their number could only be infinite. Sasa. Amid the soft crawling sounds, the tide touched the shallow ring of the moat. The tide dove forward without a hint of hesitation, they didn't need to dodge, only to fill the space with their numbers. Watching this scene, Cash began to wait silently. Quote dot 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 quote dot. Quote dot 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 quote dot. Quote dot 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 quote dot. His expression shifted slightly as the front of the tide continuously poured into the shallow moat, yet the clear water seemed like an abyss. Swallowing everything. If it weren't happening right before his eyes, Cash might have thought his army had already halted there, instead of steadily advancing. Your Majesty, there's something wrong with this water. The voice came from beside him, and Cash nodded slightly. However, he didn't feel angry about the setback. Instead, he felt a slight relief. The oracle had instructed them to exterminate this clan, and they seemed so easily defeated. But if they truly were that weak, the Egyptians should have destroyed them long ago. And there was this abnormally large tree. Although Cash believed his army was unbeatable, as gifted by the gods, and he appeared very confident, he remained on guard. Find your next adventure on novel.com. So the first barrier is the moat, no matter. Let the ants form a suspended ant bridge and send the rest of the life across. Though this would greatly slow the pace of their advance, Cash didn't mind. His army was endless, and this small city wouldn't hold him back for long. Whiz, whiz, whiz. The collisions on the ground had begun, and the power of the last of the four pillar gods, the sky goddess Nut, was gradually becoming apparent. Up in the sky, hundreds of thousands of stars began to fall towards the mortal realm, aiming directly at the vast tree. Strictly speaking, the sky goddess did not hold authority over the power of the stars, but she had birthed them and possessed the power to mobilize them. So under her guidance, the meteors, like another heavy rainfall, brought destruction and burning to the earth. Why hasn't he made his move yet? Is he not afraid that those mortals will be completely slaughtered by the stars? Feeling uneasy, Nut knew they actually had the advantage in this chess game. After all, this was Hemenu's world. While both sides would be weakened in their interference in the mortal realm, their opponents would be weakened even more. Moreover, there was another issue. Their opponent did not hold divine authority over Hemenu. This was one of the reasons the Egyptian gods had initially agreed to accept the chess game. They thought, despite the strength of the outer god, they still stood a good chance given their superiority in both supernatural and mortal realm powers. However, since the incident with Shu, almost all the pillar gods had become extremely anxious, unable to comprehend the power Mesa had displayed. Mesa was not showcasing divine miracles through the power of the outer god. This directly subverted the balance of power in the mortal realm. Thus, Nut, among others, didn't say it out loud, but at least for her, she just wanted to get through her own turn and then place her hopes on the godla. So why haven't you made your move yet? Watching the falling stars, Nut was even more urgent than Mesa. She desperately hoped the outer god would intervene to stop them, but all she faced was disappointment. Not until the first star fell upon the tree did the mortal realm remain as usual. The deity from the alien realm did not interfere. Instead, watching it all unfold. The stars fell onto the tree, and likewise upon her own heart. In an instant, Nut's heart sank. She forced a smile, looking in the direction of the god La. However, all she could see was the gold mask covering his falcon head. Don't be delusional, Nut, he has already arrived. A deep voice came from beside her, as Seth looked emotionless towards the sky. The feeling was exactly the same as when Shu had fallen, as if he was already doomed. Anubis, my unborn son. Divine power surged, and Seth did not seem to intend to sit idly by. Watching that seemingly all-encompassing enormous hand, as a deity symbolizing the land of Hemenu along with earth god Jeb, Seth soared into the sky. Divine light flickered, like a mantis trying to shake a giant tree. Chapter 684-241, Taking Shape. Rustling. Above the sea of origin, colors of black and gold intertwined and tumbled. But unknowingly, the golden tides seemed to have quieted down a bit. No longer as lively as they were at the beginning. Set, above the endless abyss, gazing at the light soaring into the sky, only cold indifference filled Law's eyes. Compared to a complete world, Shu's existence was actually insignificant, even with the addition of the three deities that had now taken action. After all, even the weakest world is still a world. Great divine power seems insignificant before it, let alone ordinary deities. However, oftentimes, sheer size does not represent everything. Existence is far more critical than quantity. Just as Chaos's law of death, no matter how incomplete, within a complete world, he still harbors Thanatos, and in Hemenu's world, the proportion of wind may not compare to water and fire, but it is equally indispensable. But now, with the convergence of wind and earth, Set, the god of desert and storm, charges towards the sky, as one of the pillars that constitute the world. Wind may face the risk of complete annihilation from Hemenu's world. Such a precise instrument, even losing a single screw, if not addressed promptly, will inevitably brew disaster in the future. Your Majesty, what should we do about the current situation? Pale as death, Earth god Jeb beseeched La, who sat atop the great sun orb. It wasn't his turn yet, but he knew it probably wouldn't be long. With his wife, who had accompanied him for thousands of years, on the verge of falling, how much longer could he hold on? After they were no more, La too would likely not escape calamity. Could it be that he felt no emotion, no panic at all? Boom! In the midst of conversation, in the sky, Set, like a moth to the flame, was struck down without resistance, and the rain god and sky goddess also had no choice but to fight to their last breath. The battle took place just beside them, and for a moment, the strength of the three deities flickered like candle flames in the wind. But due to the laws of this place, although the flames trembled, they did not go out completely. Let's not rush. Let's wait a bit longer. His eyes slightly lifted, La seemed to have responded. The scene unfolding above the Sea of Origin was not merely a clash of strength. The power of the outer god could easily crush the resistance of the three gods, but the reason they could still put up a fight was because the war in the mortal realm had not yet concluded. Thus, the forces that constituted the chessboard were faintly protecting them. However, it was evident that the struggle of the three gods might not last much longer. The chessboard has been laid out. No one can leave unless one of you can break free from the world power that forms the chessboard and then defeat the outer god in a head-on confrontation. Stay updated with Novel Bin. Calm. His eyes narrowed, La's glance swept across his surroundings. Now, aside from the pillar gods who had yet to act, only three remained: Earth god Jeb, god of Underworld Osiris, and Nephthys, the protector of the living and the undead. In fact, this was the outcome he had intended. The enemy had more tricks than he had imagined, but La was not without countermeasures. You can't do it, nor can I. What we can do now is prepare as much as possible for the next step. Tearing. On the earth, beneath the tall trees, a brutal struggle continued. Cash had underestimated Aaron's preparations. The spring water, which seemed to be laced with a deadly poison, had been manipulated by human hands. The bridge of ants he had built quickly extinguished by the waves, halting his momentum once again. But Aaron's tactics also seemed to come to an end there. When Cash ordered his armies to bring in dirt and rubble in the most primitive manner, intending to fill the moat with their own destruction, it was only a matter of time before they would come to close quarters combat. Rustling. Above the Sea of Origin, colors of black and gold intertwined and tumbled. But unknowingly, the golden tides seemed to have quieted down a bit, no longer as lively as they were at the beginning. Set. Above the endless abyss, gazing at the light soaring into the sky, only cold indifference filled La's eyes. Compared to a complete world, Shu's existence was actually insignificant, even with the addition of the three deities that had now taken action. After all, even the weakest world is still a world. Great divine power seems insignificant before it, let alone ordinary deities. However, oftentimes, sheer size does not represent everything. Existence is far more critical than quantity. Just as Chaos's law of death, no matter how incomplete, within a complete world, he still harbors Thanatos, and in Hemenu's world, the proportion of wind may not compare to water and fire, but it is equally indispensable. But now, with the convergence of wind and earth, Set, the god of desert and storm, charges towards the sky. As one of the pillars that constitute the world, wind may face the risk of complete annihilation from Hemenu's world. Such a precise instrument, even losing a single screw, if not addressed promptly, will inevitably brew disaster in the future. Chapter 685 to 241, Taking Shape _2. Don't rush, wait a bit longer. La's eyes slightly lifted, as if responding. The scene above the Sea of Origin was not merely a display of power. The strength of the outer god was enough to easily crush the resistance of the three gods, but their slight ability to resist was because the mortal realm's war had not yet been decided. Therefore, the power constituting the chessboard was somewhat protecting them, but it was clear to everyone that the struggle of the three gods likely couldn't last much longer. The chessboard has been spread. No one can leave, unless any of you can break free from the world power that constitutes the chessboard, and then defeat the outer god in a head-on confrontation. La's gaze narrowed as he glanced around. Aside from the pillar gods who had yet to make a move, only three remained: Earth god Jeb, god of Underworld Osiris, and Nephthys, protector of both the living and the undead. In reality, this was a result he had intentionally brought about. The enemy's methods were more numerous than he had anticipated, but Lo was not without countermeasures. You can't do it, and neither can I. All we can do now is make as many preparations as possible for the next step. Your next chapter awaits on novel Bin, calm, tearing. On the land, beneath the towering trees, the harsh combat continued. Cash had underestimated Aaron's preparations. The seemingly poisonous version of Fountain's water could actually be influenced by man. The ant bridge he had constructed was quickly extinguished by the waves, once again stalling the offensive. But it seemed like Aaron's tactics had also reached their limit. When Cash ordered his army to use the most primitive method to transport soil and rubble, trying to fill the moat with a do-or-die approach, the countdown to close combat began. The spring of life was ineffective against the lifeless, and a path was easily filled by the endless insects and jackals, even though the water kept churning. The inundating army surged like a tide, clashing with the soldiers who had been soaked in the fountain's water in advance. Things then slid towards the direction Aaron least wanted to see. Although the desert's insects and jackals were temporarily unable to contend with the soldiers soaked in the fountain's water, their numbers were 1,000 to 10,000 times that of the guards. They fearlessly crossed the defense lines, rampaging freely in the tents at the rear. The camp boiled with panic, as people scrambled, running in all directions. Stamping, pushing, even intentionally tripping others to clear a path for themselves. The sinfulness of human nature was unmistakably exposed. Accompanying this was a series of thunderous sounds. The booms came from the sky, and the rainwater trickled down from the void. "Will we fail, sir?" Aaron, who had already discarded his sword for killing, used a broad door panel to smash to death a cluster of venomous insects in front of him. The gap created was quickly filled by the others that followed, undaunted and untiring. "No, others I'm not sure of, but you will definitely be among the last to die." Letting out a breath, Aaron felt like a reef in the vast sea. If things reached the most critical point, he would decisively lead his people back to the vicinity of the fountain's source, establishing the most solid defense line. But it wasn't time to do that yet. He was still waiting for a turn in events. The power granted to the great prophet by God might be beyond our imagination. It's just a matter of seeing whether he has the heart to strike decisively. But then again, I don't know whether I truly hope for him to be ruthless or prefer him to stay as he is. Humans are such a contradiction. What Mesa could sense, Aaron naturally could as well. When he made the offerings of the faithless to the great trees, he also noticed changes in the towering trees. Whether it was a coincidence or there was some connection, Aaron did not know. But at least he knew they wouldn't fall here. Boom! Another fallen star, even larger than the previous ones. A hole was smashed through the branches of the great tree, and rainwater poured in a slant. The panic in the crowd intensified. At this point, Mesa must have also realized the severity of the situation. "Never mind, we continue, and you guys also try to give me a chance." "What?" That person. Looking towards Cash in the surging darkness, Aaron smiled. "Whether we retreat or not, I have to kill him first. A snake can't move without a head, nor can a bird fly. Without their leader, these insects and jackals will be much easier to deal with. Their numbers might indeed be endless, but as their master, I wonder if this man has an undying body?" Undying is naturally a joke. Hemanu does not have undying. So, crouching low and pretending to flee in panic, Aaron signaled his most capable assistants to charge with him. If it weren't for the spring of life, Aaron, as Mesa's brother and at his age, would not have had the strength to charge into battle. Crack. Like a bolt of lightning streaking across the boundless surface of the water, it stirred up tremendous waves. When Aaron intended to strike at Cash amidst the surge of insects. In the void, the power that had been protecting Seth suddenly dropped. Although things hadn't started yet, the outcome seemed to have been foretold. In this situation, had Seth chosen to curl up beside the rain god and the sky goddess, he might have been able to survive a bit longer. However, feeling this change, he still pressed forward unabated. "Seth, how did I not realize before that he is so valiant? Had I known, I might have changed the order, let Jeb act before him, and saved him for later." A slight regret passed through his heart, but it was fleeting. Chapter 686 to 241 Shaping _3. Watching the outer god take action for the second time, Ra Autumn's reaction was calm and indifferent, unlike the god of sun. He watched the scene above the Sea of Origin. Set's final counterattack still proved futile. When the outer god once again abandoned the mortal realm, its life and death were predetermined. The moment Set was held in their hand, Ra sensed the momentary weakness and lament of Hemenu's world. But compared to the last time, Ra was not as furious. On one hand, he knew he couldn't stop it, and on the other, because unlike the first time, the death of a deity had its gains. The death of mortals with the bloodline of the deities from the outer realms was a lesser concern, but what was most important was that although he did not notice when Shu had just died, as time passed, Ra unexpectedly discovered some changes. For instance, while the world's strength was wounded, the force that confined all gods to the Sea of Origin had also diminished, allowing them to project even more of their strength. Of course, on this point, the outer gods and they were the same. Another example. With the complete death of a god, Ra was surprised to find that along the absolute space he had partially mastered, it seemed more strength began to pour into him from the world. Even as Set was about to follow suit, this influx of strength became swifter. This wasn't the first time. Ra was well acquainted with this change. The reason he was able to evolve from the god of sun to Amun-Ra Autumn, and then steal the power of the 8 primordial spirits, was because he had once received Hemenu's blessing during an encounter with an outer god outside the world, taking the opportunity to intercept some of that strength. Based on this, after Ra's rebirth, he was able to successfully add Amun to his name and gain greater strength. And now, this feeling was all too familiar. So, they see me as the savior, huh? With his aura contained, Ra did not reveal any of his changes. At this moment, he didn't feel valued or cared for by Hemenu. Instead, he found it a bit laughable. The world's blessing, where had it been all this time? If thousands of years ago, when the blood of the outer gods first flowed into the world, it hadn't just provided him with a vague revelation, Ra could have eradicated those sinister bloodlines at their inception, even utilizing them to decode the laws of the alien realm. Then, the situation wouldn't have deteriorated to this extent. What was supposed to be conflict between worlds somehow allowed the deities of the other side to invade their realm. Even if that opportunity had been missed, had the world shown him such favor 1,000 years ago, his own strength could have certainly gone further to truly cover every corner of the world. Under such strength, Isis, the traitor, would have nowhere to hide, and he would have been able to plan with ease, recognizing problems in advance and making various responses. Even as of now, if the world were willing to give him all its strength at once, Ra could overturn the chessboard before him, letting the outer god know that this place is not an alien realm, but his Egypt. Then he could keep this outer god here forever, or even turn the tables and become a thorn in the side of the opponent's world, reversing the tides of attack and defense. However, at this moment, Ra felt the rate at which his internal strength was growing. He could probably estimate that if there were a progress bar for this realm above that of a true god, then even if the rest of the 9 pillar gods all perished cleanly, the strength bestowed by the world would probably not fill this progress bar. Your next chapter awaits on novel bin.com. It's like a program with predefined rules. The more it lost, the more chips it would bet. But by the time it really got to that point, what sense was there in making a change? Well, it's also a method. Kill, the strength of theirs you devour. How much stronger can you get? If you have the guts, kill them all, and then kill me, god of sun Ra Autumn. His expression was calm as he saw Set fall into the hands of the outer god, just like Shu had before. One of the 9 pillars suspended above the Sea of Origin, representing the desert and storms, crumbled bit by bit, source power flowing like water towards the outer god. The foundation of the world trembled once more, and the laws that shrouded everything began to show minuscule gaps and flaws. Yet unlike Shu, what surprised Ra was that Set, from beginning to end, emitted not a single sound. As if he were a steadfast warrior, preferring death to surrendering to the enemy. As this Set? It seems my understanding of him was too limited before. I thought he was a god passionate for power, heartless and ruthless, but in essence, he was so unyielding. Such a pity. With a slight shake of his head, Ra felt a sense of lament, but the will of the gods would not be swayed as a result. The void flickered, space-time flashed, Set's Ka and Ba dissipated and sublimated in the palm of the god. In the distant 5th layer of the spirit realm, At the core interface, the void also quivered slightly. Chapter 687 to 242, Quasi-God, Dragon and Anubis. Outside the spirit realm, the interstice between spirituality and the material realm. In an indescribable manner, the authority and soul that Set once possessed arrived here in an instant, on the verge of plunging into the center of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. Plop tilde. The magic net gently fluctuated, stirring a small ripple in this gap zone. Since the beginning of the second epoch, this place that came into existence with the opening of the spirit realm was filled with endless time and space. The power extended from the spiritual core isolated it from all connections with the material world, making even primordial deities hesitate before it. It wasn't until the end of the second epoch that a great net formed from the burning silver fire covered everything, woven from the laws of spirituality and elements, becoming the bridge for communication between the two. Therefore, in a sense, the magic net is significantly connected with both the spirit realm and the present world because the elements truly have a connection between the two. As the ages of the third epoch passed, the magic net also expanded and grew stronger. In today's world, it is rare to see a place not covered by the magic net. Alien realm, this is their world. Chaos. Within the amalgamated soul, a pain that reached to the origin struck Set's heart. Just like Shu before him. Regardless of everything, as a deity, they still could hold on for a while. Shu saw the 7 layers of the spirit realm at the end of his life, and for Set, maintaining clarity of consciousness until seeing chaos wasn't difficult. Of course, this was the limit. Set was certain that his current state could not be maintained for long. His Ka and Ba were being continually destroyed and reassembled, with the spiritual order belonging to Hemenu being perceived by the presence behind. Then, a new order was filled in, resulting in a different soul structure. Set vaguely guessed that perhaps, after his death, his soul would be transformed by this alien deity into a special kind of life, and the characteristics of many Egyptian deities might thus be preserved as well. Perhaps Shu too knew that even in death he would not find peace. No, but then again, we are not mortals. After complete obliteration of consciousness, where does the notion of peace come from? The closer to death, the clearer his thoughts became. Set looked at the vast world before him, far larger than Hemenu, and grew increasingly tense. On his body, a diminishing black and golden glow flowed unstably. Especially the black part, which seemed to be in tacit harmony with that enormous world. This is the power of the world, the power that constitutes the laws of the chessboard. Unlike Shu, strictly speaking, when Set was captured, he hadn't lost yet. Stay tuned for updates on Novel Bin, Com. Although his defeat was inevitable, as long as Cash, whom he had granted authority to control the desert vermin beasts, was not dead, he could actually linger a little longer, much like the rain god and sky goddess who were about to meet the same fate. It's just that Set chose to resist, and the god fulfilled his desire for death. After all, the little power that remained couldn't protect him for long, and it would completely dissipate once he entered the spirit realm. And in any case, as Set, he was bound to die. The magic net softly hummed, and although it felt like a long time in his mind, it was merely an instant. Set's soul weaved through the strings of the magic net, the great web linking spirituality and matter unfolded before him. Set didn't know what this structure was, nor what it was a tool for. But when he sensed the aura similar to the black glimmer on his body, he decisively abandoned some things that weren't his. The next moment, this deity of Hemenu, the god of the desert and storm, was pulled into the 5th layer of the spirit realm. The part of him that belonged to wind was extracted, falling toward the newly formed wind element plane. The part of him that belonged to earth sank in the opposite direction, beginning to evolve into a new earth element plane. The budding form of the water element plane also began to emerge, waiting for the upcoming feast. The 5th layer of the spirit realm trembled excitedly, as if cheering for its own perfection. But all this was no longer related to Set. Hemenu's pillar god died here completely, becoming another sacrifice in the conflict between the two realms. He wasn't the first, and naturally, he would not be the last. Chaos, the mortal realm, dark region. Beneath the earth, above the underworld, the underground world sandwiched between them. This place is called the dark region by the few living beings above ground who know of its existence, meaning a place that will never see the light of day, emerging from the darkness. Of course, Some people simply call it the underground world, because they believe that the underground is a vast world, much like the underworld and the surface, vast in scale. Although they have only touched a tiny part of it, yet it cannot be simply described with the word region. In any case, scholars' debates are always strange. A title and a description can lead to lengthy arguments. But whatever this place is called, it does not diminish its danger. Legends describe a beautiful but cruel and sly underground race living here. Even adventurers who have lived to return from this place claim the presence of dragons. Dragons, a demonic monsters-like species inherently powerful, but with human-like wisdom, and even capable of normal reproduction. Although few have seen a real dragon, legends about them have circulated among humans for a long time. Roar. In the scorching depths of a cavern, a massive red dragon lay sprawled at the center of a lake of molten lava. Chapter 688, Chapter 242, Quasi-God, Dragon and Anubis _2. A deep growl echoed within the cave. It seemed somewhat cautious. For beside it, several large dragon eggs were absorbing the power that permeated the air. Undoubtedly, this was a red dragon about to nurture its offspring. Although as a naturally evil dragonkind born in the dark region, this type of dragon was not keen on raising offspring. At least when the hatchlings were just born, they still entered into a sense of responsibility. If nothing unexpected happened, it would wait here until several dragon eggs hatched and then raise them until they could hunt by themselves before driving them out. Which was the usual process. However, this time, it might not be so lucky. Whoosh! Roar! Being extremely vigilant already, the moment the disturbance occurred, the red dragon opened its jaws wide and instinctively spewed a breath of dragon flame toward the direction of the sound. The blazing flames, which seemed capable of burning everything, left the red dragon with the impression that there were few lives in the world that could directly face its fire. Swoosh! Without a moment's obstruction, it was as if the two existed in different dimensions. A meteor, flickering with black and gold light, flashed by, passing directly through the dragon flame and piercing into the body of the red dragon. Time seemed to freeze for an instant, and then, with a loud explosion, the body of the red dragon, tens of meters long, violently burst into pieces, scattering across the sky. Pieces fell, drifting down like snowflakes, and the seemingly powerful red dragon collapsed on the spot in an instant. However, what was surprising was that, when the scattered dragon blood fell to the ground, it strangely formed new eggs of various sizes. They bore the scent of the red dragon, but were not quite similar. Who am I? Am I Set? Am I Anubis? Am I a red dragon? I am a deity of Hemanu. I am a deity of chaos. But where is Hemanu? As if memory confusion had occurred, it took a moment before a phantom figure emerged in the now quiet cave. He had a human torso, a head like a wolf or a dog, and a pair of wings resembling those of dragons. His eyes were at times confused, and at times frenzied. An unknown amount of time passed before a bit of lucidity appeared in his eyes. So that's it, am I alive again, or merely another person with memories? Dragon, I hadn't expected someone else would think to join me. He's just not as lucky as I am, for he hasn't awakened yet. With a flicker, the being with the head of a gouthead and seated himself on a random dragon egg. After some previous sorting out, he finally roughly understood what was going on. A world war was imminent. He, provisionally considered as him, realized the arrival of death. However, the power of the world was so strong, the power of the outer gods was likewise not something he could contend with. He wanted to find a way to save himself, but he had neither the wisdom of Thoth nor the strength of La, so with no alternatives, he had to take a gamble. So, when the outer god acted, Set resolutely gave up the idea of clinging to life a while longer and instead sought death actively. But it was also seeking life through death. His own power was so insignificant, neither the world nor the outer gods were something he could oppose, hence borrowing power was the best solution. Before he completely lost the gambling game, and before the mortal realm's cash and the beast tide were annihilated, his life was protected by the power of both realms. Thus, such a daring plan took shape in his heart. With no other options, Set gambled everything without hesitation. Even with the protection of world powers, he knew that he was destined to die, and the idea of escaping from the hands of an outer god was utterly delusional. Fortunately, his offspring with Nephthys had not been born yet, so Set decided to take a bold gamble. He extracted the still-developing Ba and projected his thoughts into this spirit that represented the emotional desires of the Egyptian gods. As Set, he was a spoil of war to the outer gods, and all that he had was inescapable, but the rules of the game did not involve bloodline or offspring. So when he sensed the power from chaos on the other side of the magic net connection, Set immediately carried out his plan. Now, Set truly did not know whether he had succeeded. In fact, he vaguely felt that he might indeed be alive, but that probably had nothing to do with Set. Does the continuation of memory and cognition mean survival? Rather than saying I am Set, it's more accurate to say I am a new god that inherited his memories. Since I was originally supposed to be his descendant, let my name be Anubis from now on. The god-headed Anubis made a decision, and in fact, his current appearance came from this. The original Egyptian god of death, Anubis, had always been a god with a dog, wolf, head and human body, even more known than his ancestors. And the dragon wings behind him, naturally, came from the red dragon bloodline. After all, Anubis discovered that his current form of existence seemed a bit strange. Having devoured a red dragon, he had originally planned to directly seize the other's body. But when Anubis tried to do so, he discovered some secrets deep within the dragon bloodline. Dragonkind, this race from the Otherworld might, like him, not be a native existence of chaos. Thus, upon discovering this fact, Anubis changed his plans. He was not a god of chaos, lacking an immortal essence. When he lost his authority, he also lost divine power. But the secrets discovered from the red dragon changed his mind, and Anubis was astounded to find that there was another way to wield power in this world. Binding oneself to a species, serving as the origin of the species, to form a pseudo-authority that transforms faith and thus possess divine power? Worthy of a survivor from a destructive disaster of the Otherworld, to think of such means. With some admiration, Anubis readily accepted. He then gave up taking over the red dragon's body, and instead using his ba as the foundation and the red dragon's flesh as the cornerstone, he created a new species. This was not true creation. Devoid of the authority of life, Anubis found it difficult to achieve that. However, as a god originally in the form of a dog-headed person, he actually formed this new species in his own image, and unsurprisingly, the new species also inherited this characteristic. Of course, once Anubis chose to bind himself to a species, the influence became mutual. So, as the new species possessed the dragon vein of the red dragon, he too grew a pair of dragon wings. I'm not sure what I should be called now. According to these fragmented memories of the red dragon, in this world called chaos, there exists a peculiar kind of territorial god, somewhat similar to the guardian gods of Heminum, city-state. They generally do not possess real authority, yet they all wield divine power. Tied to a territory, if the territory remains indestructible then divine power does not cease. Can I be called a territorial god then? And since I am bound with a species, if the species survives then power never ceases. Can I be known as a species god? No matter what kind of god, in the end, it's just a title, but power is tangible. Thus Anubis quickly dismissed this thought, it was just a minor issue. These gods without substantial authority, it wouldn't be wrong to generally categorize them as quasi-gods. What happened in the past is over. What I need to do now is ensure that the Gouthead people proliferate and become an indispensable part of the world. This was an immortality that even the former Set did not have. Thinking of this, Anubis couldn't help but feel somewhat emotional. Indeed, good birth is better than good deeds. Compared to the gods of Heminu in his time, the gods born in chaos were already far superior from the moment of birth. Chapter 689, Chapter 243 Dispelling the Clouds. The arrival of Anubis was inconspicuous. In this remote and desolate underground world, few deities paid it any heed. The boiling flux of world power also masked a lot of movements, especially when enveloped in his descent's black golden light, making the sensation no different to the few who could sense the collision of world forces than it had been before. However, this suited Anubis's intentions just fine. Newly arrived in the alien realm, he wanted nothing more than to quietly settle in for a while. Thus, pushing aside his earlier doubts, Anubis began to contemplate the entities he must beware of going forward. Compared to Heminu, with only the Nile River and the great desert flowing through the world, this world was still too vast and mysterious for him. The fragmented memories of a red dragon were hardly enough for him to grasp the realities of this world, making much of the content as elusive as flowers in the fog. Hence, until his clan had developed to a certain extent, Anubis preferred to lurk in the underground, focusing on developing the Gouthead people while being a thorough Gouthead himself. Isis, behind the existence of the Dragon Clan, know of 3 outsiders alone, not to mention others that might exist. Compared to Hemanu, Chaos is much more open and truly much stronger. Based on the logic of a world's operations, he must have already hosted many stronger foreign guests before, otherwise my arrival would not have been this smooth. His gaze flickered slightly. Anubis felt that perhaps some among the remaining 9 pillar gods could also escape a calamity. The contention between these 2 worlds was far from a swift victory. Hemanu had always possessed some capacity for resistance. Under such circumstances, it wasn't surprising that others could escape like he had. Others are manageable, as everyone is here to flee for their lives, but I absolutely cannot let Isis discover my tracks. If La is alive, it's best to stay far away from him as well. Mulling over it in his heart, the former needed no further explanation, as the other party was indeed a traitor. And while Anubis was the betrayed party, that didn't mean he could simply wave a hand in forgiveness and agree to leave each other in peace. He claimed he bore no grudges, but would Isis believe that? Anubis certainly wouldn't believe it if their roles were reversed, especially considering that he was also the fish that had slipped through the net of that terrifying outer god. Although he was unaware of what rank the other held in this world or how it compared to La's status in Hemanu, Anubis wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. As for the matter of La, it wasn't that complicated since Anubis neither wanted to continue mixing with his old boss nor attract too much attention from the native deities. Once a god of the Otherworld and a being above the true gods, if La died, all would naturally be resolved. If he survived, then he would be like a giant spotlight, attracting everything. At the end of the day, everything still depends on the strength of the power. In my current state, I could be one of the weakest gods in the entire history of the world. Shaking his head slightly, having lost all authority and divine power, and only able to bind with his race, Anubis's strength was unprecedentedly weak. His race was still only a few eggs, and it was unknown how long it would take to reproduce. Moreover, most importantly, Anubis was astonished to find that in this otherworld, the inherent nature priesthood among deities could not be wrested from each other. A god that cannot usurp a priesthood, is that still a god? Such gods, aren't they doomed from birth? Anubis found this hard to comprehend, knowing that even the god of sun's divine seat was wrested from the initially supreme deity. Autumn. While the chaos world was more powerful and ordered, the fixity in priesthoods genuinely caught him off guard. This might be a good thing for the world, but not necessarily for someone like him. The only piece of good news is that in the memories of the Red Dragon, this world still harbors a kind of beings known as totem spirits and nature spirits. They often start as wild beasts, plants, or even mountains and stones, then for some unknown reason gain wisdom, thereby developing faith, receiving sacrifices, and eventually even ascending to divinity, to become deities. However, these beings appear to be killable and their authority usurpable. He knew this from the memory of the Red Dragon because it coveted the authority possessed by a totem spirit not yet ascended to godhood. In its recollection, that seemed to be a priesthood linked to excavation. The Red Dragon wanted to use this domain to unearth more treasures in the underground world while consequently gaining stronger power. Now it was dead, but Anubis felt destined for this priesthood. It just so happens this is an underground world. Being the birthplace of the Gouthead people, it's inevitable that excavation and smelting are needed, so it seems my luck isn't that bad after all. The passage of time in Hemanu is slowing down recently. I'm hoping before it ends there, I can establish a foothold here. Having made a secret decision, Anubis hesitated momentarily, then he spread his dragon wings and gathered the eggs beneath him. On his first day as an otherworld deity in chaos, his primary task was to hatch eggs. Hiss. Drip, drip, Hemanu, the fall of Set was just the beginning. In the black tides, as if sensing the breath of the spring of life from those humans, a few empty spots appeared, where no bug or ant dared to draw near. Chapter 690, Chapter 243 Dispelling the Clouds _2. It was through this opportunity that Aaron successfully came up to Cash. Normally, legs could never outrun horses. But in the presence of the widespread creatures, mounts turned into a burden. After a brief and perilous scuffle, when Cash's weapon stabbed into the enemy's abdomen, Aaron also finally succeeded in running a sword through the chest. Drip, drip, blood flowed down the blade, sprinkling droplets on the ground. As Aaron withdrew his sword and stepped back, Cash's body fell to the ground with a dull thud. Looking at the bulging eyes of the corpse, Aaron covered the wound on his waist. From the opponent's attire and belongings, he identified the sudden attacker. The ruler of Nubia, a defeated general under Ramses II. Perhaps just yesterday, he had been reveling in commanding a massive army to destroy cities and settlements, and after annihilating the Hebrews, avenging his past humiliation, crushing Egypt. But now, he died so easily. His grand ambitions had no chance to unfold, and just like that, he had fallen in this inconspicuous corner. My lord, these vermin are still attacking. Although without someone to lead them, their advance lacks coordination, but their numbers. It's of no concern. Waving his hand to interrupt his subordinate, Aaron turned back and looked at that towering tree, as high as the clouds. In just a short time, this tree had grown more than twice as tall, but the hollows on it had also become more numerous. Rain seeped through, the sound of the fallen stars incessant, some even descending through the holes. However, after a rough estimate, Aaron felt that the problem was not major. There won't be a problem. God has seen the suffering we endured. He has already bestowed greater power to the high priest. This sky-blocking divine tree is the proof. Soon, this disaster will declare its end. Calmly opening up, after this period of ordeal, Aaron felt as though he had grasped something essential. Perhaps, soon there will be a major epidemic in the mortal realm. It might be due to the excess rain, the dead lives, or it could be due to something else. Before he finished speaking, Messa saw the giant tree on the horizon tremble. The great tree shrank back to its place of origin. With nothing to stop them, the rainwater lost its obstacles, fallen stars hit the mortal realm directly. Without its shelter, the earth seemed about to be smashed into flatland, yet at that moment, Aaron actually smiled. This is the divine miracle the Hebrews traded their lives for. The next instant, the clouds above were cleaved, and the falling meteorites turned to dust. Sunlight shone anew on the earth, and the dark tide scattered and fled. The survivors kneeled on the ground, devoutly thanking the deity for his protection. Exposed skeletons whitened the surface. Aaron slightly beckoned, signaling the people around him to come closer. Prepare to go back. Return to the city. Give thanks for the divine grace brought by the high priest. Yes, my lord. The expressions of the surrounding soldiers were somewhat peculiar. In their view, Aaron had led them in fighting the enemy, devising various solutions to problems. Yet, all of this paled in comparison to Messa's divine miracle. He only had to sit there, pray briefly, and express his compassionate views, as if he were the savior. If the gift of the god had not fallen upon him but upon Lord Aaron, would they not have had to suffer so much and could have left Egypt sooner? The answer was unknown, and no one dared to question. The soldiers began to gather the bodies of their companions and then returned to the city under construction. They were to bury the bodies so that the spirits of the deceased could find rest. Sunlight shone down, and cheers came from all over the city. At the heart of the new city site, Messa held the scepter that had returned to its original form. Perhaps it was nourished by the spring of life, or maybe it was because it was sprinkled with blood, but the scepter's appearance became more ancient and mysterious, and its power increased day by day. When Messa realized that simple defenses could not cope with the attacks of natural disasters, and from the perspective of the divine tree, saw countless insects flooding in from the outside world, he subconsciously wanted to eliminate them, and he succeeded. The giant tree transformed back into a staff, then erupted with a power beyond his imagination. The clouds parted under Messa's will, fallen stars turned to dust, and the invading ant beasts in the city were obliterated to ashes. Yet holding this staff, Messa felt no joy whatsoever. The more suffering he endured, the stronger the power of the scepter became. But Messa wished it remained just a normal piece of wood, not the sacred artifact that could summon storms and rains as it now could. Sovereign Lord, do our bloodlines really carry original sin from birth, and even with your almighty power, must we clear our sins to be redeemed? Feeling confused and helpless, the smell of blood lingered at his side. Messa did not know how many of the hundreds of thousands had died, but his instincts told him it was not a small number. High priest? Yes, I'm listening. Snapping out of his reverie, Mesa only then noticed that someone had come to his side. The man was looking at him excitedly, as if in awe of the divine miracle Mesa had displayed. It's like this, you just dispersed the disaster, and all over the city, people are pouring in. I don't know. I will go, but it was not I who dispersed the disaster, it was God who dispelled the calamity created by the gods of Egypt. Mesa nodded as he corrected him. He indeed needed to uplift the spirits, as the disasters they had faced recently were too many. The sky, the location of the 9 pillars spirit. Not much time had passed, and of the 9 pillars which originally stood between heaven and earth, only 5 remained. Thoth had narrowly escaped disaster, simply because, strictly speaking, there was no winner or loser between him and Isis. Before Ra, only 3 usable spirits remained: Osiris, god of the underworld; Nephthys, goddess of protection for the home and the dead; and Geb, the earth god. The scene was somewhat desolate. Nephthys was silent, Osiris's gaze flickered, and Geb seemed frightened. Especially since his wife, the sky goddess Nut, had been taken right beside him. The prestige Ra had built over 10,000 years was nearly gone, and the remaining deities were reluctant to act again. Everything prior seemed to prove that to act was a prelude to death. There's no point in delaying. Maintaining this status will lead to the world's end, and everyone will naturally be judged to have lost. Sitting on the celestial sphere, Ra spoke calmly. He seemed to have realized that he could not force the gods to act. Instead, choosing to use words to persuade them. But if death is inevitable, then surely it's better to die later than sooner. And no one can guarantee that there won't be a turn of events in the future. The place fell silent for a moment, and seeing that no one responded, Osiris did not look towards Ra, but stared at Thoth across from him. Besides, if one were to speculate who has a greater chance of winning the next round, would it not likely be your majesty?